The Roman Empire lasted from 753 BC to 476 AD, or at least the western half of the empire did. Today, I'm going to go through ancient as well as modern texts to discuss as to how it was able to last for so long, especially with its wide expanse and through incorporating newly conquered territories into the empire to become Roman, which, as you'll come to find, that it was this process of integrating new peoples into the empire not only allowed new fresh ideas into their way of thinking, but as well as just spread peace throughout the civilized peoples of the world, or civilizing the peoples of the world. And if you starting with the ancient text, or just if you go to the origin story of the Roman process, was they tied themselves to the Greek ancestral line because they claimed to be descendants of Troy. Like during the fall of Troy, one of the princes, Aeneas, who was the son of Priam, escaped with a small contingent of Trojans, had a little adventure around the Mediterranean until they finally landed in Rome. And that story was created by Virgil. And in the story, it says, you Romans, remember by your empire to rule the world's peoples. This will be your arts. Impose the practice of peace, to be sparing to the subjected and to beat down the defiant. When that becomes your origin story, it's almost as though, like, you're able, since you come from a conquered people, you are more than likely to have more, how would you say, more understanding, or a bigger heart, as to say, hey, you loser today, friend tomorrow. And that was even something that they lauded Romulus of having some sort of like had the idea of looking at an enemy as a citizen in the same day. And when I say enemy as a citizen, like, you were an enemy, but now that you lost, you threw down your arms. All right, welcome to the club. Part of what allowed for this to be the case is just the Romans' view on religion and their imperial cult, one could say. Because like during Caesar's Gallic wars, or his campaign against the Gauls, he noticed that a lot of the Gallic gods were pretty much equivalent to the Roman gods. They just had different names. Mercury was Tautelus, Apollo was Belin, Mars was Esus, and Jupiter was Tyrannos. Which, please forgive any sort of mispronunciation of any names. As things went on, they were kind of just looking at people between like Romans and non-Romans. Like, to be Roman was something to aspire to. It was a way of thinking, a way of life that also brought with it many benefits, be it public works, laws, an economy, different things that would help establish a lasting peace between peoples. Because there's a saying, not from this time, but it's like when goods can flow freely between peoples, then armies tend not to flow between two peoples. So when you create a system that interconnects people through trade, you're more than likely not going to be fighting. So, but there were obviously problems that could arise from these, because not everybody was necessarily welcoming the idea of becoming Roman. If you look at the like, one of the people that were a big headache to this whole process was the Hebrew or Jewish people, and it's mostly because of their own compact with their God, as they could only worship one God, because the Jewish God is very jealous, as one would say. So their lack of willingness to worship the other gods that the Romans had is what really kind of drove a spike into their relationship with the Roman people. Also, if you went into, as the Romans expanded up into Britain, there was one general. I guess he would be a Celt at the time, or whoever the native peoples of Britain were. Uh, and his name was Caligulaeus, and he pretty much damned the Romans because to them the slavery had not been something that had been brought into the Roman Empire. Now, when it comes into like integrating these different peoples into the Roman Empire, there was debate, especially after much of Gaul was pacified, and the many years later, the debate came down from Claudius in the Senate that and it said, our founder, to go back to this, what else brought extermination to the Lacedaemonians and the Athenians were, was that even though they had a superior force of arms, they excluded the vanquished as being aliens. And that was the kind of the Greek tradition in the previously was just they would rule over people, and then they're infighting within themselves between the former generals of Alexander was ultimately what beat down their ability. So with that, Claudius in that same debate that to try to sway the Senate into adopting the Gallic people into the Senate, at that point the dictatorship had kind of come to be over in Rome. So there was a bit of a collapse of the old order, which was the Republic, and so it was like to be in the Senate or the consul was more of a laurel than an actual like a more meaningful position, because the dictatorship had already become more powerful in both of those two chambers, and he also stated that previously, even when Rome was a monarchy previously to the Republic, they didn't have necessarily birthright succession, and because they had already started taking in other people from the empire into the Senate, into the council, it didn't seem like that big of a deal to be able to welcome in a different group of people, especially when they were bringing in with like a lot of riches and things of that nature. One other thing that should be noted, that the legionnaires became up and around that point about like 40% were Germans. So it's like the cosmopolitan image of the empire was kind of brought into that light, so that they were one of many, so to speak. So through the public works and the mass extent of roads that allowed for the free movement of people, goods, taxes, money, it allowed, and also laws, it allowed for people to, as long as they kind of like accepted these ideals of Rome, like the state religion and that sort of a thing, like it was a free movement of people and things. It was, to be Roman they were divorcing that from ethnic identity and more towards a frame of mind of what it was, like a higher sense of self. Now, and when we go into the modern readings, Ms. Roth had said, used a blood metaphor that I think was actually pretty apropos. With Rome acting as the heart, constantly drawing in new goods and ideas from around the empire, only to pump them back into Rome and then back out. So it was kind of like oxygenating blood. So it was like this constant give and take, where if somebody had a good idea from Judea or from Gaul or Germania or whatever the hell it was, those things would come into Rome. It would kind of revitalize the state and get pushed back out. Now, also one of the ways to kind of pacify people was just to see the benefits of becoming Roman, like aqueducts brings fresh water, baths are, nice, like it's to be able to be clean shaven, and as well as like be able to get like fruit from like various parts of the empire. It's like you're getting all these cool goods and services that would otherwise not be available to you. So it's like if you look over at your neighbor's fence, it's like you want to be, they might have a boat or something like that, so you might want to be friends with them so you can go sailing sometime. That's like the benefits of being peace. And that's also what they brought. When you have all these people working together, there's a level of peace that exists why would you want to be in a constant state of war? It would be beyond me. Citizenship and Latin rights. Romans of the local ruling classes into the Roman Empire. Brunt says the Roman Empire was the first that rested on the consent and not on the force. Well, goes back into the whole concept of like after you conquered it and then you have the infrastructure in place to quickly dispatch troops and goods and everything else, like it made for a central thing. The one thing that was also an advantage to Rome was just it being centrally located in the middle of the Mediterranean. So a lot of things, it was easy for everything to flow in. So there may have been a geographical bit of advantage to the Romans as well. But, unlike future empires into the future, the Romans did not bring with them the same sort of things that the British and the French imperialists did, which was like ideals of liberty, equality, and national sovereignty, which in the end would have been subversive to their own aims, because it was just they kind of decentralized their power structure from Rome to the center, and then their provinces that were relegated to their different regional leaders. It's much like the American United States of America. Now, when it comes to, I did some extra research on globalization in the Avant letter through Hitchner, where he kind of parallels the Roman Empire to modern day globalization, and some of the things that he was able to illuminate was just in that, like, the globalization was it's in spatial terms it's more of a matter of relative perception as opposed to physical reality, because it's obviously Rome wasn't the entire world, but it was in terms. So this complex, but they still invented this complex system of interconnectivity and the integration that allowed for it to be occur. Because in the mid-3rd century BC, the Republic claimed sovereignty over most of Italy and a large citizens and non-citizens population that united by shared political and military values and ruled by a government. The city-state institutions of Rome, which would legitimately be defined as unitary by virtue of the fact that all local and self-government, however, was autonomous affairs. So those local regional people. But they ultimately depended on Rome for its continued legitimacy and authority. And it became, in the words of one scholar, a community of interest based upon shared values, meanings, and beliefs, which did not replace any pre-existing identities, just supplemented or relativized them. So basically, you didn't have to stop being a Gaul or a German or a Jew or anything, as long as you kind of just agreed to these ideals of being Roman, and give Caesar what is his. And I mean, so there was the pattern that they developed through this conquest was, first you send in your troops, which you march in, kick everybody's butt, and then you allow for the goods to flow, and you would then Romanize the whoever your elites were in that local area, just because by granting them citizenship and their desire to kind of be a part of they already had sway over the local population. By granting them authority, kind of just, you're not really changing much. You're just allowing them to stay in charge. And then finally the emperors, which would just allow for this network to increase the interconnectivity and the integration into the Roman world. So with that, so all the processes enhance connectivity. Globalization is a more intense version of connectivity, promoting greater movement of goods, peoples, and ideas. But I mean, the one thing that you would have to consider is that the Roman Empire was also still built on a lot of injustice. Slavery ran rampant within the entire empire. And but it's interesting though, because it's like, it's, I wouldn't say that there was racism, but there was definitely a us versus them, in terms of they didn't value people who they didn't consider to be civilized, which to them, they were the only game in town when it came to being a civilized person. Promoted. So it was like, for them, they just really promoted the common cultural meaning on a universal scale, but they didn't want to destroy the local identity. Now, when we look into the different manufacturer, public works, military. Oh, yeah, other ways that also help integrate people into this whole thing was just in terms of being, there was other tools at hand, like one of them being serving in the military, because in serving in the military, it kind of like divorces people from their actual identity. Like, as using my own experience in the Marine Corps, I had my own personal prejudices before signing up for the Marines, and it's not even, because like I grew up in the Northeast, and next thing you know, I'm meeting people from the South, like, call them rednecks, or the people from California, a bunch of fruits and nuts, or Texans, cowboys. It's like, at the end of the day, there was such those smaller identities. I could appreciate those guys for who they were, but at the same time, like that became less and less, and what I really valued was their actual individual, like how they performed as a Marine, how they performed so there's a subculture that kind of gets created out of that when you have this interconnectivity of people through a shared thing that kind of flattens the differences, because now you care more about rank and even your own personal exploits on the battlefield. It's funny, there was one group of people that were regarded kind of like animals. They were called the Feni, and the reason as to why they were so looked at so not even necessarily bad, because they didn't care about the way about culture at all. They kind of just lived like wild, according to Tacitus. They did not care about man. They do not care about heaven. They achieved something very different. They have nothing for which to pray. So they didn't. So how could you colonize somebody who just wants to live in nature? It's kind of like maybe like a hippie retreatist type of way of seeing things. If I go into the comment section, 1 second, please. There's a couple of things that kind of got hit on by Elena and also by Oliver that I thought were kind of interesting. I'd like to bring up. And with Elena, the Roman civilization spread wildly and quickly, permeating not only legal and imperial values, also reached more deeply and affected the cultures of the various societies touched by the spread. That's alluring, seductive, the ethnic identity. The Roman aristocrats' perception of the aristocrat's perspective of civilization was not found anywhere that he was. Jeez Louise. I'm losing my, sorry, please kind of erase that last minute. I would like to explore one question or one statement that Elena had, which was, once class and ethnic became involved and related, things can easily and quickly get complicated. And I think this can be quite an interesting concept to explore. People often identify most strongly with others who have similar backgrounds, even if they're ethnically different. So looking into what creates a bond between people across cultures can be telling. So if I'd given the opportunity, I'd like to explore that with Elena, and